why do we humans who have so much knowledge now and so much information and we know so much, why do we go on killing each other? And what's wrong with the people up there in the parliaments and governments to keep this absurd way of trying to solve disputes down to who's got more guns? Yeah, I think so. I think action was very important for me. I couldn't bear to laze about and read books and be a student just when people were suffering so much. And it was their suffering in their being, their heart, that hit my heart. So although I wouldn't have phrased it that way, but that's what stirred me. I couldn't really do anything else. I couldn't get a job as a secretary I was a student, but I couldn't do the normal things while all this was going on. It's listening with the heart so that it becomes a process of one heart hearing another heart. And I can do that. But my heart will tell me what this group of people really need. And it might be food, but it might be a hug. It might be to be cuddled. It might be to know that their father was going to come back, or whatever it is. And the heart will give me that information, or give me the right question to ask them. Because my inner critic was a massive thug for a long time. I didn't do this well enough. I'm not clever enough. I didn't take enough risks. All that goes on in our heads. And that was really the tip-off, I think, to get more into my heart, because my heart doesn't do that. Neither does yours. The heart has, if we listen to it, it has profound good sense, practical good sense. It will say that, not that. Just go into your heart and say, could you handle this for me, please, my heart? Because it hurts. And gradually, it took decades, but I realized that what people really responded to and how we got the job done, so to speak, of connecting and building things together and all that, was if I took off my persona and my achievements and all that and just confessed to, I've got a bad feeling at the moment and I need to just digest it for a minute before we open this conversation. Do you mind? In a single flash of a second, you may be offered an opportunity which may lead to saving someone's life or whatever it is, It's the heart just is such a guide. It's astonishing. The power is the responsibility. And I think the key is the moment, to be present in the moment where you become aware that you have the power to contribute something.
Hey everyone, welcome to Love and Philosophy. This is a podcast which is trying to remind us that care is in our very cells. Love is radical, and it's what really all of us are doing here and are trying to help one another do. It's about philosophy, but not just something that we study. It is about academic philosophy. Quite often we have academic philosophers and neuroscientists on the show, but it's also about how we live and philosophy as a practice, as our living. And today is one of those episodes. It's with a woman who has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times, a woman named Scilla Elworthy, mostly for her work with the Oxford Research Group, where she was, for example, negotiating nuclear weapons with policymakers and basically trying to bring more peace into the world, more care into the world. And this conversation is a sort of demonstration, I think, of what she brings and the philosophy of the heart. She's been doing this a long time. She's 82 years old, as you'll hear. She founded Peace Direct in 2002. She received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2003, the Luxembourg Peace Prize in 2020, another Peace Prize, the GOI Peace Award in 2023, and the list goes on. She also founded the Business Plan for Peace, and she's an author, and she's written a lot of wonderful texts and books such as The Mighty Heart, How to Transform Conflict, and The Mighty Heart in Action. I will put links to all her work in the show notes, but I want to keep this intro just a little bit shorter because what it's really about is said so well in the conversation itself. And I think it speaks past a lot of the noise that many of us are hearing right now, the kind of noise that makes us want to turn off all our devices. Kyla Scannon just wrote a wonderful piece about how we're sort of being manipulated by our very desperation, the creation of desperation, and then sort of things getting sold to us to help us control that desperation. But it's a very vicious, ridiculous loop. It's connected to competition, and we could reframe through care. And that's what I have been talking about a lot, and I hope we can do, and I think so many people are already doing. And this is one of them. Scilla is definitely showing us how to listen to the heart as a philosophical text in a way, or a philosophical bodily friend that we all have within us. And that is not weak. I hope we can all remember that what we give our time and energy to is making whatever we're giving our time and energy to stronger. And I think there's a kind of illness that we're all noticing in a lot of people that seem to be powerful or successful. Just remember, the reason people are powerful and successful is because others give their attention to them. So what do we want to give our attention to? That's really the question. Who and where and what does not make us feel desperate and helps us help others not feel desperate? Those are the real powerful forces right now. Let's find them. Let's help each other make them. Let's be them. I think today's guest has been doing that for 70 years, as you'll hear. And as she says, it hasn't been easy. It's not that she's done it perfectly or always had the answers, but at 82, she knows that the heart is strong. And I think we can listen to that and we can learn from her. And I just wanted to share this with you today with that, in that spirit, and about how literally sometimes the most powerful person and the most powerful presence in the room is one that's listening. So thank you for listening to this, and I hope wherever you are today, you feel some heart, and you feel your heart, and you ask your heart for help, and your heart responds. Okay, bye. Hello, Scilla. So nice to have you on Love and Philosophy. Thank you so much for honoring us today and coming on the show.
It's a great pleasure.
There's so many things about you and your work that are very moving for me, but I thought I'd give you a chance first. Just what would you like for people to know who might just be hearing your name for the first time off to start?
Oh, I would like to transmit a message to the people who watch your show about the importance of the heart today for everybody and for the world. After working with conflict and war for 70 years, I started when I was about 12. Yes. Yeah. I really feel that the importance of the heart today is grossly underestimated. And the more one works with the heart, the more you feel the power of it. So I'd love to come to that. But I'm happy to respond to any questions you have about how I got here and what I feel is important today.
Well, let's think about that young girl. So were you about 12, 13, early teens when you saw the tanks rolling in to Budapest? Is that the moment that you sort of...
Yeah, you've done your homework. Thank you. Yes, I was brought up on a very safe farm north of London. My folks were farmers, and I was at a school where they opened our eyes to what was going on in the world, and that started me watching TV and listening to the radio, and I saw the uprisings that were going on all over the eastern part of Europe, and I wanted to go and do something and help. And so I've always been moved by killing, suffering, and I had a mother who had been very active in the First World War, looking after wounded soldiers, and because my father was in the First World War fighting. And she was a great traveler, but she would do anything to see how she could help with the debris of war and the casualties. And she was driving wounded soldiers from an airport outside Edinburgh, where she lived, to the hospital to get them attention. And so, and she took me traveling very early on. She took me to Kenya in Africa when I was 8 or 9. And so I got a habit of travel from her. And she was also very inquiring, very interested in other people. And I'm infinitely grateful to her for making me unafraid of opening a conversation with anybody.
So when she saw you reacting this way to the tanks rolling in, I think you wanted to go there. Did you start packing your suitcase or something? You seem to have been
I did.
action oriented.
Well, I watched a TV program when my parents were out, and I was so shocked by what was happening that I went upstairs and started packing my suitcase. And my mum came in and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to Budapest in Hungary." And she said, "What for?" And I said, "There's something so horrible going on there. I have to go." I think I was 12. And she said, "Don't be so silly." And I burst into tears. And so then we opened a conversation, which was one of many that we had about the fact that she had got herself involved in the casualties of the First World War. And I now wanted to do my bit and insisted that I had the right to do that. And eventually she got it. And she was quick to pick it up. And she sent me off to work in a holiday home for concentration camp survivors, not very far from where we lived. And I sat on the grass peeling potatoes and listening to the stories of what had happened to them in the Second World War, the concentration camps, the appalling suffering. And there was something so honest and natural in the way that they weren't horror mongers at all. They were just telling me what happened. And I was so moved that I started to keep a diary about it and write about it, and got more and more interested into the debris of war and the terrible tragedies that war brings about. And often the people who have started the wars have no idea of what they do to people's lives. And whether they are people in destroyed villages who have to flee for their lives, or whether they are the children and relatives of soldiers who get killed. And it just, the whole thing seemed to me to be so absurd. Why do we humans who have so much knowledge now and so much information and we know so much, why do we go on killing each other? And what's wrong with the people up there in the parliaments and governments to keep this absurd way of trying to solve disputes down to who's got more guns?
I wonder how you, at that age and also through your life, were able to hold that. One thing I love reading your work and listening to you is it's so bodily, and you're really present and you're really feeling it with your body. But I think this can be very hard for people too. Or I wonder if it was hard for you when you were young to notice this violence and this pain when you were writing, or you were already processing it somehow as living body, not just, it just seems very immediate in the way that you noticed it. But I often hear it presented as a kind of abstract problem.
No, it wasn't abstract at all. It was in my heart straight away. My heart hurt. And I couldn't avoid the information that I now, as a teenager, knew was available. And somehow the more I could find out about it, the more able I felt to do something about it. So I went, aged, 17 or 18, to Algiers, where there was a war going on in Algeria. And then from there progressed down through Africa, through the Congo, which was at war at the time, and all the way down to South Africa, which, as you know, is a very violent country. And And I stayed there for quite a long time, working mainly with starvation, because although South Africa is a very rich country, at the time when I went there, in my early 20s, there was starvation right through the so-called homelands where Black people lived, and not much was being done about it. So I couldn't help but get involved with a nutrition company which distributed very basic high nutrition foodstuffs to people in conflict areas who really needed it. And that felt very real and practical. And you saw that, you helped people save their own lives.
So you were acting. I know you probably didn't think about it like this at the time, but was that your way of dealing with that pain, or that? Because even as a young kid, you immediately went to pack your suitcase, and then, you're so active and there's so much action immediately. Do you think that was the way you were able to being able to handle that difficulty?
Yeah, I think so. I think action was very important for me. I couldn't bear to laze about and read books and be a student just when people were suffering so much. And it was their suffering in their being, their heart, that hit my heart. So although I wouldn't have phrased it that way, but that's what stirred me. I couldn't really do anything else. I couldn't get a job as a secretary, or, be a student, well, I was a student, but I couldn't do the normal things while all this was going on. And in some cases going on not very far away. So I wanted to roll up my sleeves and say, let's do something. And that's where in South Africa I started various organizations to help distribute foodstuffs to starving people, but also to get education going for young Black children, and which was very little attended to. And it's much better now, much better now.
So much has changed since the apartheid. It's good to remember that things have changed. I also seem to remember it was during this time you started to notice how powerful women are in the community.
They were, and using minimal tools or supplies. They didn't have mobile phones, of course, in those days. They had no communications at all except verbal, and song. Song was very important, but also to help them find ways to help themselves. So set up systems whereby they could access, for example, milk powder, because many of them, through starvation or whatever, their milk had run out and they had small children and they were desperate. So milk powder was terribly important. It wasn't very tasty or nice, but it was better than nothing. And so we shipped huge quantities of milk powder out to the so-called reservations, where the poorest of the poor were sent away to starve. And that felt good, and to go and see how helpful it was for them. Yeah.
And taking care of the women in that way, sort of, you saw it reverberate, I guess, if the women were stronger, or...
Yeah, the women were aching to take part and almost elbowing their way into organizations, trying to be part of white-run organizations who were often very unfriendly to them. They were trying to get the kids educated. That was high on their agenda, because they knew that being educated and literate was the way to free themselves and free their families from starvation.
In all this action oriented, you're acting so much, but I feel like you were also listening. Do you remember when you started cultivating that sort of power of actually, listening?
I think that's become really central to my life and my work. And any young people wanting to start and do that kind of work, I encourage them to spend a lot of time really listening, because most of the time you're a very good listener, but most people aren't. They thinking what they're going to say or how to make a clever remark or tell their story or whatever it is. But the more we can actually listen to what's really going on for somebody who's in trouble, particularly somebody who's suffering in some way, and really, really tune into what it is they need, then we can be far more help far more quickly than just getting carried away with the emotions or the story. But to listen in such a way that you get below the narrative and into what is really needed. Because it might be food, it might be water, but it might be safety. Mm.
And it sounds like this kind of listening isn't only listening to words.
Mm.
It's not just, have you noticed there's different sorts of language that you listen to?
Yeah, well, it's listening with the heart, so that it becomes a process of one heart hearing another heart. And that's when you learn what it is you can do that's most useful. If you're just listening with your head, you're making plans, you're writing budgets, you're doing all that, which is great and it needs doing. But when you tune in to somebody in trouble with your heart and really listen to them, they will open up a treasure chest, really, of what it is they really need. And it may be that they want to bury their grandmother properly, and they might not tell you that straight away, but if they know that you're attuned to them, not just with your mind, but with the rest of you, they will reveal to you much more quickly what it is they really need.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of as the heart? For some people listening, there's so many different people coming from different walks of life, and so heart is going to mean so many things to so many people, coaches, philosophers. So how do you think of heart? I'll tell you how I'm imagining when I hear you say it. I'm imagining kind of your whole body open from this most vulnerable place, in a way. But I'm also imagining that as a kind of strength, like a kind of almost like that sort of protects you in a way at the same time that it's the most vulnerable opening. That's kind of the image that comes to mind when I hear you say it, but maybe you can help us understand that word.
You push it really beautifully, Andrea. That's very much the same way as I see it. But it took me, I'm sad in a way. I mean, my heart was obviously going out to people in trouble. But now, and over the last, say, 20 years, I've used my heart, if it's not pretentious, to be a sounding board for action. My brain will say, oh, go and raise some money, and I can do that. But my heart will tell me what this group of people or children or what really need. And it might be food, but it might be a hug. It might be to be cuddled. It might be to know that their father was going to come back, or whatever it is. And the heart will give me that information, or give me the right question to ask them. Are you worried about your dad? Yeah, I am. I don't think he's going to come back, And then more detail about what's really necessary.
That's very powerful, because I was thinking of you when you're a little kid, and it sounds like you're very much seeing yourself in what's around you, if that makes sense. Not demarcating so much in terms of I'm separate from what's around me. I'm not saying you were thinking that way, but you're that immediate action and needing to take place feels very much as if what you see happening is part of you.
Mm.
And that can be very overwhelming and difficult, right? When you feel all of that so much. And I can imagine that some people would have tried to, there's these things of create a tower of books around yourself, or create some kind of shells around yourself, not go directly even deeper into the action. Also, what comes up when you were talking is I've been feeling lately, the more you can just be present, you are in a communication with whatever is around you without even, you don't have a choice, if that makes sense.
It's
So,
certainly,
yeah.
it's certainly mysterious. But the thing that I've learned is that we need, those of us who choose to do this kind of work need to nourish ourselves. You can run out of juice and then you do bad work, you do stupid things. So I've found, and it might be different for different people, but for me, being in nature is vital. I need to touch and be in trees and walk on the grass, but also having a garden is an absolute, it's like medicine. It doesn't matter how big it is, it can be a little tiny plot, but growing something for yourself and for other people is utter nourishment, because you're getting your fingers dirty, you've got your hands in the earth, you're planting the seeds, and you forget everything else then. You forget everything. And so it sounds a bit sort of privileged, but a little tiny plot of land, or even a window box outside your window, to put things in, to plant things in that will grow and surprise you, and you can eat them or love them or whatever. And that is, even if it's on a small scale, but growing a garden with other people who are underprivileged is often a soul restorer for them. It restores their soul because they can be useful, they can plant things that will grow and feed other people, and they sort of expand when they can do something with the earth, and the earth responds, of course.
That's exactly what I was trying to get at with that communicative thing. There's that's a perfect example of it, of participating in this together, with the people around you too. I wonder when you noticed that, or when you realized that, kind of, was that early on too, that how did you take care of yourself? I'm still kind of thinking about this young woman who's in these situations, and how did you did you find that early on to go out into nature and restore yourself, or?
One way or another, yeah. But I don't think I learned it tangibly. I don't think I thought, I've been traveling for 3 days, I'd better get out and get my feet in a stream or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I just gradually learned that if I didn't get out and feet on the ground, I would be more heady and less useful. I'm workaholic often, and I have spent many years in my 30s and 40s at a laptop, literally, or typewriter as it was then, just needing to get through piles of paperwork and starving myself. And it took me until my 40s and 50s and having children helped. Because they would say, "Oh, I've got to get out, Mum," and they would lead the way. And so it became almost just daily part of life to spend at least some time with vegetables and digging and that kind of thing.
It's so wonderful. It's also that bodily presence that I feel in your work too, of really being bodily engaged with whatever's around you. But also there's another part of your work which is this know thyself, self-inspection, kind of, in a way that right now we hear we're not supposed to do. I mean, from tech people, at least, there's been some interviews recently where they say don't inspect. Don't self-inspect, just act. And I don't hear you saying that either. So I'm wondering how that arose for you too. Because I feel like for you, that's also this heart and this body. It's not in the head either. But I wonder from your point of view how that fits with what we're talking about.
Well, it was in the head a lot. I mean, I had the privilege of being able to have an intensive course of what you might call, well, therapy with knowledgeable older women, and I read a lot of psychology, and I was deeply curious. But then I realized that a lot of it was staying in my head and driving my head, and I didn't realize it categorically for a while, probably until my 50s. I think menopause was very helpful in that I really got more into my body. And so being able to translate what's troublesome out there into what can my small gifts be able to contribute to that situation or that person. And yeah, it was, your questions are very good because they're helping me really think about what drew this passion for understanding the connection between my brain and my heart and my body.
Yeah, because you feel very rooted and present in your body now with the heart. But I'm thinking, I'm half your age, so like how do we get there, and how do we focus and grow into that? But also I'm thinking about the work you've done, which is very significant and has a lot to do with you have to introspect, but you're also having to be present with people who are maybe not introspecting, maybe very difficult, wanting very different things. And, you talk about it as bullying sometimes, I think, in a way, or this violence, right? This kind of regression, I guess I'll bring that word in. That can be very hard to face, right? With the heart, this vulnerability and this listening. And I want to bring that up a little bit. Also, the idea of the inner critic, which you've talked about. And I don't know if those are connected, but that way that we criticize ourselves or we see others criticized, and how that can become a kind of false power or bully. I don't know if that's making sense or what that brings up for you.
Because my inner critic was a massive thug for a long time. I didn't do this well enough. I'm not clever enough. I didn't take enough risks. All that goes on in our heads. And that was really the tip-off, I think, to get more into my heart, because my heart doesn't do that. Neither does yours or anyone. The heart doesn't. The heart has, if we listen to it, it has profound good sense, practical good sense. It will say, that, not that. So the heart is just incredibly good at information when we need it. Now, I'm not answering your question, which was, how do we deal with self-criticism, for one thing? I think self-criticism is not a bad thing if we listen to it with a kindly ear, not, I'll beat myself up again, which a lot of us do. Sometimes we try and hide it, but we do beat ourselves up. And that's very, so disenabling that it needs to be dropped. It needs to be dropped.
Thank you for saying that. I think that's going to be a relief for some people, just to hear that you don't have to, you don't have to even criticize yourself for criticizing yourself.
Just let it go. When it comes up, oh my God, I forgot that, or I didn't tell that person that, or I hurt them. Just go into your heart and say, could you handle this for me, please, my heart? Because it hurts. And that gives me shivers, actually, just even to say that.
And that gave me too.
Yeah. Because the heart will say, no problem, just leave it with me. And off you go. And the heart can digest it. can digest, shed loads of it, and relieve us of self-mutilation and self-harming in whatever way we do it, because we just do an injustice to what our good, healthy, heartfelt motives are.
Yeah, it's more like the garden, or that communication of that natural communication, that there's something nourishing in what you said, and generous, which is like a garden when you care for it. And I guess I want to see how that, because this feels to me very related to even this very high level sort of work trying to help, negotiate about nuclear weapons or whatever, all these big topics that could seem far away from that. It feels, I wonder about your journey, or if this was connected in you finding a way to connect with your heart and listen, and also that being a way you could be present with other people in these other situations. Was that happening at the same time, or?
Well, it was also daring do. Do you know that expression, daring do?
Throw yourself in, kind of.
Yeah, I thought, and partly because I was brought up with people in my family who'd been in the army and so on, I thought, well, I can do that. I can talk to generals, and they're not such a big deal. I always had this sort of chutzpah, it's chutzpah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll have a go. I'll ring up that colonel or admiral or whoever it is, and nearly, it's hard to get through to them sometimes because they always have armies of people protecting them. But if you have a good reason and a good question, you can normally get through. But once I witnessed what happened when I took a delegation of British Army, Navy, and Air Force, very senior people, and some of the bureaucrats who supported them and supplied them with their ships and stuff. And I always treated these men with great respect. I didn't despise them because I knew they were doing many honorable things, honorable work. And I took them to meet their opposite numbers in China. And at first it was a row of Chinese one side of the table, very stiff, and me and my admirals and generals on this side. And we needed to break the ice. We needed to show that we were humans, because the Chinese were very nervous, because if you put a foot wrong as a senior person or any person in China, and you didn't do what was expected of you, or you gave a wrong response, you really had a hard time. And so my job was to really try to I was going to say moisten the atmosphere, to soften it, to say, yes, we have some very serious things to discover and discuss. But meanwhile, it would be just lovely if each of you would talk about one of your children, or the child that you're very fond of, for a minute or two. And if you have a photograph on you, great, share it. And our delegation did the same. And that just changed everything. And keeping it short, the whole thing took maybe 10 minutes out of a 3-hour meeting. But the conversation over coffee was completely different. Did you really have how is your blind grandchild now? Or, how does your wife feel about you doing this work, or whatever it was?
Oh, that's just beautiful. I love that. It's such a shift of perspective. And actually, it was something I was going to ask you about, is like how you don't condemn people in your head or in your heart if you've come into a room with someone who's very dangerous, or who has hurt a lot of people, according to whatever story you've been told. But you just showed me, actually, it's kind of somehow shifting out of that current situation, right? Almost what you did is a little bit like, you said something about surprise earlier, or you like surprise, and there's some kind of element of doing what you wouldn't expect one to do or something. Does that make sense? Kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. Breaking the mold. as much as you can, doing something unexpected, natural, human, and let's see. It's like sending a little message on a dart or an arrow over into the other consciousness, which is maybe quite protected, and people on their best behavior and worried about making a mistake, and sending a little message, I'm human too, or talking about a mistake you made, or even in one instance I had stumbled on the stairs coming up to the meeting room, and before I said my name or anything, in my self-introduction, I said, well, I'm the person who nearly fell down your stairs, and it was my fault. It's not your stairs' fault, or something like that. And it was sort of, it was allowing people to be a little foolish or whatever. And it all helps to get the humanness into the room.
That reminds me again of what I was seeing earlier when you were talking about the heart, because you're opening the vulnerability in a way. If you're talking about something like a mistake you made or your children, there's a sense of opening the vulnerability, but actually doing that is such a strong thing to do that you are stronger and you appear stronger. So it's a very interesting way of both of those being there.
Well, it's about allowing the humanness to come into what would otherwise be a very stiff and best behavior type of meeting. And there's something else. What I encourage people to do at meal times was to tell their neighbor something about their children or their nephews and nieces or school children that they knew. And that opened up lovely conversations between them and somebody from a completely different culture.
You know what's so beautiful about that too is that not only do you see other people as having families and with these histories and, tangled up gardens, so to speak, but you also remember yourself that way.
Yes.
Because I think that's very important, right? Sometimes we go into these situations and we try to leave all that behind, and we're a different presence then.
That's quite right. We're our CV or our, our achievements and so on, which often get in the way of an actual connection.
Is this what you mean by power with? Because you talk about power with, which I think is really interesting. It's not just the power to do something or the power over something, but this kind of, which is often the way we frame power. But I see or hear in your work that there's something about power that is this community gardening or something.
Well, it was my way of getting over my childhood, and many of us have this, and in my teenage, trying desperately to build myself up to be important and knowledgeable and effective and all those things. And I really was a nightmare, I think, doing that, because it was all producing a picture which wasn't necessarily true at all. And it was my image of myself. And I was very fond of it. And it was about how I dressed and how I looked and all this. And gradually, it took decades, but I realized that what people really responded to and how we got the job done, so to speak, of connecting and building things together and all that, was if I became more naked, if I took off my persona and my achievements and all that, and just confessed to, I'm feeling, I've got a bad feeling at the moment, and I need to just digest it for a minute before we open this conversation. Do you mind? And do that, or say, I'm feeling bad this morning because I forgot to phone X, and could we possibly interrupt the proceedings by just make a quick phone call? And it's annoying for people, but if it's really important, you can make the space for it.
Thank you so much for saying that. I think this is what we really need to hear right now, and what isn't happening, or what we don't think of that as powerful. When you experience that in the moment, you feel the room change, and there's real power if you can almost just be present with what the case is and state it.
That's it. What's the immediate? And the immediate might mean you're desperate to go to the toilet.
Which makes a big difference about your stress and frustration. But I think it's very hard to do because of all that stuff you just said, because we build up this way we want to be seen by others. And often when you're going to say the thing in the moment, it's not going to really fit to that story,
Exactly. You're destroying your carefully built image, and giggling a bit like a child.
Yeah, because there's a kind of ecstasy in it, or a kind of I think it has something to do with that surprise element, or that I was trying to bring up, and this not necessarily working from a blueprint,
That's right. And being a bit badly behaved, or not following the rules.
Yeah, letting yourself, I mean, of course you want to fill into what is the real case, not just do that to be kind of crazy, but feeling into that. It's a powerful place, I guess, is the thing.
It has to be in the you've nailed it, because it's not, you can't come in with something, I'm going to do that to shock them. No. It has to be in the actual moment, or taking a fellow female guest aside in a frightfully important meeting and saying, "Have you got your Tampax?"
These kind of things, they make a difference. I think we get sort of prompted to do that. We have this feeling, I should say this because it's so real, and often we don't listen to it. We let it pass. But if you can start to learn to listen to those moments of I don't know what it is, prompting from a real place, it's amazing what they can lead to. That makes me think of all the women that you talked about in your examples too, because the women who you talk about as courageous, they're also coming from places where they have to be in the moment and not just taking things down. Have you found that as a source of real change, I guess, in the world too? Is not just, I don't know what it is exactly, except I'm trying to think of what enables people to act in the moment with courage, even when their life is maybe at stake. Is it connected to this heart in the way, to bring it back to that?
It is, because your heart knows what the moment needs. And it's taken me all my life to get that. But if I don't know what is needed in a room or a meeting with somebody, I have to just breathe 3 or 4 times quietly into my heart, and my heart will say that, talk about that, or ask for what that person needs in terms of that. And it always reveals something more real than any sort of polite conversation would reveal.
That's that real power and energy that real change comes from, which you speak of a lot in your work. I guess
you know a lot about it, or you wouldn't be interested. You wouldn't have arranged our conversation today in this way and asked me these questions, because you already know all this, which is lovely.
I felt it, and I want others to feel it. I think it's similar to how I feel that in you too. You really want to give this, and I really want people to realize the real power in this. And it's a different kind of way of living, I think.
It is, because it's very momentary. In a single flash of a second, you may be offered an opportunity which may lead to saving someone's life, or their marriage, or whatever it is. It's the heart just is such a guide. It's astonishing. And just to take that fraction of a second, for instance, prompted me just now to turn the conversation back to you. I wasn't doing it to be polite. My heart took me there and said, this is a really interesting woman. Talk to her, not just as an interviewer, but talk to her as the really profound woman she is. And it was a joy.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate you and your work, and I think you just kind of demonstrated it, which is really very beautiful that you did that, because just thinking of that little girl that we started with, there was a kind of responsibility to it. And I think that's what I feel in this, is that this power with and this sharing and this in a good way, right? The power is the responsibility, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the power is the responsibility. And I think the key is the moment, to be present in the moment where you get become aware that you have the power to contribute something.
Yeah, and you definitely have, and I want to say thank you. And I also, before we go, want to offer, if there's any experience of love or anything at all that you want to share before we end for now.
An experience of love.
Yeah, I always ask at the end because it's love and philosophy, so you don't have to say anything, but I always want to give people a chance if anything comes, if anything arises.
I spent the weekend with my nephew and his wife, who are both gardeners and both holding down very big jobs in institutes as well. And we went into their garden, and they were just telling me what was growing there, and the connection that there was between the four of us, just touching the leaves or smelling the vegetables or whatever was growing, was so deeply connecting. And it was a source of nourishment. It doesn't really answer your question, but it moved me a lot, that it was it couldn't have been pre-thought or prearranged. It was just there.
That's actually really beautiful. It reminded me of when we were just going back and forth in our emails. I said something about, is love the skeleton or the scaffolding? And you were like, no, love is the change, right? It changes what we perceive, which changes what we do. Mm-hmm. And I love that you did that, because it made it alive again. I was trying to make it into some structure, and you put it into the life. And I think that example you just gave really says that love, that kind of love that you just expressed, changes what's possible, right? That the perception of that garden or that plant, and also, what it's doing. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Andrea. It's been a terrific conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I'd really like to learn a bit more about what you do, because you're asking all the pertinent questions of today, now. And unless we wake up ourselves and everybody we can touch now, I fear for the future.
Me too, and that's why I was so connected to your message, because it's such a strong message that I can't imagine we need anything more right now. I really want us to come into that caring and that body and that power of that, not as it's soft, but it's so powerful. It's a whole different way of being in the world, right? I don't want people to miss it.
Good. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bye. One quick thing before I go, I want to say thank you to all of you for listening, but also one of you in particular who's been a listener for a long time, first on YouTube, and now, like many people, just wanting to kind of have audio experiences because the internet has gotten so crazy. And for that same reason, I don't want to say your name out loud, but I received an email from you at some point over the past few months, but I cannot find it because our inboxes have just gotten completely insane, and I'm not really sure what happened, but I can't find the email. I know you sent it, and please send it again. I'm very sorry that I couldn't respond. Email has just gotten out of hand. And even the inbox got full, which I didn't even know could happen. And I just don't know. Anyone else also, if I've missed your emails, that's because I'm a little overwhelmed at the moment by correspondence. and work, but I'm trying my best, and it really means a lot to me, all of it, always. Please know that. Also, I want to tell you about an event that I'll be doing in New York City on April 11th with Sophie Fiennes, who is a wonderful filmmaker, always been one of my favorite. And if you're in New York City, come watch her wonderful new movie and say hi. I'll be talking with her about her movie, and I'm really looking forward to that. I'll put some information in the show notes about that. So would love to see you there. And also, I want to thank Mark McCartney of What is a Good Life, because he is the one who introduced me to Scilla. He put us in contact, thinking we would have a nice discussion, and he was right. So lots of gratitude to Mark, and check out his work if you get a chance. All right. Bye, everyone.